The wagon wheels splintered apart on the jagged rock with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. And Gemma Easton knew in that instant. Her carefully planned journey had just become a fight for survival. She tumbled forward as the wagon lurched violently to one side, her belongings scattering across the dusty New Mexico terrain like seeds in the wind. The horse whinnied in panic, breaking free from its harness and galloping away into the vast emptiness that stretched in every direction. Gemma hit the ground hard, her hands scraping against sun-baked earth and sharp stones. Pain shot through her palms, but she barely noticed it over the hammering of her heart. For a long moment, she simply lay there, tasting dust and fear. The August sun beat down mercilessly, already making the air shimmer with heat waves that distorted the horizon. She pushed herself up slowly, wincing at the ache in her shoulders and the sting of her scraped hands. The wagon sat at an awkward angle, its broken wheels splayed out like a broken limb. Her supplies were scattered everywhere, water canteens rolling across the ground, precious liquid seeping into the thirsty earth. Gemma was 23 years old and had thought herself prepared for anything when she left Missouri 3 weeks ago. Her father's death had left her with nothing but debts, and a cousin in Deming who had written promising work at his general store. She had sold everything, bought this wagon and horse, and set out with determination burning in her chest. Now, standing alone in the middle of nowhere with her only means of transportation destroyed, that determination wavered like a candle flame in the wind. She retrieved what she could, gathering the scattered supplies with shaking hands. One canteen remained intact, maybe half full. Some dried meat, hardtack, a blanket. Her spare dress was caught on a piece of sagebrush, fluttering like a surrender flag. She pulled it free and folded it carefully, as if maintaining that small dignity could somehow make everything less terrifying. The landscape around her was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. Rust-colored mesas rose in the distance, their flat tops cutting sharp lines against the brilliant blue sky. Sparse vegetation dotted the sandy soil, tough desert plants that had learned to survive on almost nothing. She wished she had their resilience. According to her map, she should have been only a day's travel from Deming, but that meant nothing now. On foot, in this heat, with limited water, a day might as well be 100 miles. Gemma looked at the sun, trying to remember what her father had taught her about direction. It was afternoon, maybe 3 o'clock, the sun starting its descent but still blazingly hot. West. She needed to go west. Or was it southwest? Panic clawed at her throat as she realized she wasn't entirely sure anymore. The past weeks had been a blur of following wagon ruts and occasional signposts, not paying enough attention to the land itself. She decided to stay with the wagon for the rest of the day. Moving in this heat would be suicide. Maybe someone would come along this route. It was not a main road, but it was not completely unused either. She had passed 2 other travelers in the last week. Hope felt thin, but she clung to it. As the sun finally began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been breathtaking under different circumstances, Gemma huddled against the broken wagon and tried to plan. She would wait until tomorrow. If no one came by morning, she would start walking at first light when it was cooler. She would head toward what she hoped was west, toward Deming and safety and her cousin who was expecting her. The night was worse than she had imagined. The temperature dropped dramatically once the sun disappeared, and the single blanket provided little warmth. Every sound made her jump. Coyotes howled in the distance, their eerie calls echoing across the empty land. She had heard they rarely attacked people, but the knowledge did little to calm her racing heart. Small creatures rustled in the darkness, and once she heard something larger moving past, though it never came close enough for her to see what it was. By the time dawn broke, she had barely slept an hour. Her body ached from lying on the hard ground, and her throat was already dry despite rationing her water carefully. She forced herself to eat some of the hardtack, though it sat in her stomach like a stone. She allowed herself 3 small sips of water, knowing she had to make it last as long as possible. The sun rose quickly, and with it came the heat. Gemma gathered her meager supplies, fashioned a makeshift bundle from her spare dress, and began walking. She kept the rising sun at her back and slightly to her left, praying she had the direction right. The land was deceptive, looking flat from a distance but actually full of small rises and dips that exhausted her legs. Her boots, designed for town wear not desert hiking, rubbed blisters on her heels within the first hour. By midday, she knew she was in serious trouble. The heat was overwhelming, pressing down on her like a physical weight. Sweat soaked through her dress, and she had already drunk more water than she intended. Her lips were cracking, and her head had started to pound with a dull, persistent ache. She tried to rest in the shade of a large rock formation, but there was no real relief from the heat. She must have dozed off despite herself because she woke with a start to find the sun had moved considerably. Panic seized her. She had wasted precious time, and now she was even more disoriented. Which direction had she been traveling? Everything looked the same, endless desert in all directions. She stumbled to her feet and continued walking, choosing a direction almost at random, driven by desperation and fading hope. The afternoon blurred into a haze of heat and pain and thirst. She finished the last of her water as the sun began its descent again. Her throat felt like sandpaper, and her thoughts were becoming disconnected, floating away before she could quite grasp them. She fell twice, her legs simply giving out beneath her. The second time, she seriously considered just staying down. It would be easier to just lie here and let the desert take her. But something stubborn in her core, the same stubbornness that had driven her to make this journey in the first place, forced her back to her feet. She would not give up, not yet, not while she could still move. As dusk approached, she crested a small rise and saw something that made her heart leap. Smoke. A thin column of smoke rising in the distance, maybe 2 miles away. Where there was smoke, there were people. Where there were people, there was water and help and survival. She stumbled toward it, falling more frequently now but always getting back up. The smoke seemed to mock her, never getting closer no matter how far she walked. The light was fading, and she knew if she lost sight of that smoke in the darkness, she would die out here. Then she fell one more time, and this time she could not get up. Her legs simply refused to obey. She lay on her side, staring at that distant smoke, tears of frustration and fear tracking through the dust on her face. This could not be how her story ended. She was supposed to reach Deming, start a new life, maybe find happiness. She was not supposed to die alone in the desert at 23. She did not hear the horse approaching until it was quite close. The sound of hoofbeats on packed earth finally penetrated her fading consciousness, and she tried to lift her head. A figure on horseback was silhouetted against the deepening twilight sky, and for a moment she thought she must be hallucinating. "Please," she tried to say, but her voice was barely a whisper, her throat too dry to form proper words. The rider dismounted quickly and knelt beside her. "Lord have mercy," a deep male voice said. "How long have you been out here?" Gemma tried to answer, but no sound came out. Strong hands carefully turned her over, and she found herself looking up at a face that seemed to swim in and out of focus. A young man, maybe in his late 20s, with several days' worth of stubble and concerned dark eyes beneath the brim of a worn hat. "All right, miss, I have got you now," he said, his voice steady and calm despite the urgency in his movements. "You are going to be fine." He lifted her with surprising ease, and she felt herself being settled onto his horse. He mounted behind her, one arm supporting her against his chest as he gathered the reins. "My camp is not far. I have water and food. Just hold on a little longer." Gemma wanted to thank him, wanted to ask his name, wanted to explain what had happened, but darkness was closing in around the edges of her vision. She felt the steady movement of the horse beneath them, heard the man's voice speaking to her in low, reassuring tones, but the words no longer made sense. She surrendered to the blackness, trusting her life to this stranger because she had no other choice. When she woke, it was fully dark. She was lying on a bedroll near a small fire, a blanket tucked carefully around her. Her first conscious thought was water, and she must have made some sound because the man was suddenly there, kneeling beside her with a canteen. "Slow sips," he instructed, supporting her head with one hand while bringing the canteen to her lips with the other. "I know you want to gulp it down, but slow sips or you will just bring it back up." The water was the most wonderful thing she had ever tasted. She wanted to drain the entire canteen, but he pulled it away after a few sips. "More in a minute," he promised. "Let that settle first." Now that her immediate need was slightly eased, she could focus on other things. Her rescuer was younger than she had first thought, probably around 28 or 29. He had dark hair that curled slightly at the collar, and warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when he offered her a gentle smile. His clothes marked him as a working cowboy, worn denim pants, a faded blue shirt, scuffed boots, and a bandana tied loosely around his neck. He had a capable, weathered look about him, the kind of man who was comfortable in this harsh environment. "I am Quinn Everett," he said, settling back on his heels. "And you are," Gemma, she managed, her voice still raspy. "Gemma Easton." "Well, Miss Easton, you are about the luckiest unlucky person I have met in a while. How did you end up wandering around the desert?" She explained haltingly about the wagon, the broken wheel, the horse running off. As she spoke, he gave her more water, small amounts at regular intervals, and produced some jerky softened in water that was easy to chew and swallow. "Your wagon broke down yesterday afternoon?" he asked, and when she nodded, he let out a low whistle. "And you walked all through today in this heat. Miss Easton, you are tougher than you look." "I do not feel tough," she admitted. "I feel foolish. I should have been better prepared." "This country does not forgive mistakes," Quinn said, his tone matter-of-fact rather than critical. "But beating yourself up about it will not help anything. You survived. That is what matters." "Thanks to you," Gemma said, meeting his eyes. "You saved my life." He looked uncomfortable with the gratitude, shifting his weight and focusing on stoking the fire. "I did what anyone would do, but you were the one who was there, the one who found me." She paused, a thought occurring to her. "What are you doing out here anyway?" "Are you traveling to Deming as well?" "Actually, I work at a ranch about 10 miles south of Deming," Quinn explained. "I have been out checking on some stray cattle that wandered this direction. Was planning to head back tomorrow." He glanced at her, his expression serious. "Which works out well because you are coming with me." Relief flooded through her so powerfully she felt tears prick at her eyes. "Deming? Yes, my cousin is expecting me. He has a general store there and I am supposed to work for him." "Then I will get you there safe," Quinn said, and something in the simple certainty of those words made Gemma believe him completely. "But first, you need rest. We will leave at first light when it is cooler. Try to sleep now." She wanted to protest that she should not take his bedroll, that he had already done too much, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Her eyes were already closing as she heard him moving around the camp, settling in for the night. She drifted off to the sound of the fire crackling, and the strange comfort of knowing she was no longer alone. The next morning, Gemma woke feeling more human, though every muscle in her body ached and her sunburned skin felt tight and painful. Quinn already had coffee brewing over the fire and the smell was heavenly. "How are you feeling?" he asked as she sat up slowly. "Like I was dragged behind a stampede," she admitted, accepting the tin cup of coffee he handed her. "But better than yesterday," he grinned. "That is saying something." He had already packed up most of the camp and was saddling his horse, a sturdy bay gelding with intelligent eyes. "We will take it slow. There is no rush, and you have been through enough." As the morning light grew stronger, Gemma got her first real look at Quinn in daylight. He was handsome in a rugged, unpolished way, with laugh lines around his eyes and a scar along his jawline that suggested he had lived an interesting life. There was a steadiness about him, a quiet competence that made her feel safe. They shared a simple breakfast of coffee, hardtack, and some dried fruit from his saddlebags. Then Quinn helped her mount the horse, settling in behind her the same way he had the night before. It should have felt awkward, being held so close to a strange man, but somehow it did not. His arm around her waist was purely practical, keeping her secure in the saddle, and his presence at her back was reassuring rather than threatening. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," she confirmed. They set off at an easy pace, and Quinn kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out features of the landscape and telling her stories about the area. She suspected he was doing it partly to keep her mind off her discomfort, and she was grateful for it. "Deming is a good town," he told her as they rode. "Growing fast since the railroad came through about 10 years back. Your cousin, what is his name?" "Harold Easton. Do you know him?" "Harold at the general store. Sure, everyone knows Harold. Good man, fair prices, he will take care of you." The reassurance eased something tight in Gemma's chest. "I hope so. He is my only family left now. My father died 6 months ago, and there was nothing left for me back in Missouri. Harold wrote saying he could use help at the store, so I sold everything and came west." "That took courage," Quinn said quietly. "Or desperation," Gemma replied with a trace of bitterness. "I did not have many other options. Still takes courage. Plenty of people stay in bad situations because they are too afraid to take a risk on something unknown." They rode in comfortable silence for a while. The morning was still relatively cool, and Gemma found herself relaxing against Quinn's solid presence. She was becoming aware of him in a way that had nothing to do with gratitude, the strength in the arm that held her steady, the warmth of his body against her back, the low, pleasant timbre of his voice when he spoke. She pushed the thoughts away, reminding herself that he was simply being a good Samaritan. Once he delivered her to Harold, she would probably never see him again. That thought caused a surprising pang of disappointment. Around midday, Quinn stopped in the shade of a rocky outcropping to let the horse rest and to give Gemma a break from riding. Her legs were shaky when he helped her down, and she had to lean against him for a moment until her balance returned. "Sorry," she murmured, embarrassed by her weakness. "Do not apologize. Your body has been through hell. It is going to take a few days to recover fully." He settled her in the shade and gave her more water. "How is your head? Any dizziness, nausea, just tired and sore?" "But honestly, better than I expected to feel." "You are resilient," Quinn said with an approving nod. "That is good. You will need that quality out here." They rested for about an hour, and during that time, Gemma found herself learning more about her rescuer. Quinn had been working at the Running J Ranch for about 5 years, ever since coming to New Mexico from Texas. He was good with horses, good with cattle, and clearly good at surviving in harsh conditions. "You like it?" she asked. "The ranch work?" He considered the question seriously. "I do. It is honest work and I like being outside. The boss is fair and the crew is solid. I have been thinking about maybe trying to save up enough to buy my own place someday, but that is a long way off." "It sounds like a good dream," Gemma said softly. "What about you?" Quinn asked. "Is working at your cousin's store what you want, or just what is available?" No one had asked her that before, and Gemma had to think about her answer. "It is what is available," she admitted. "But I do not mind store work. I like talking to people, helping them find what they need. And it is a respectable position for a woman." She paused. "Though sometimes I wish there were more options, more possibilities." "Maybe there will be," Quinn said. "Deming is growing. Who knows what opportunities might come along?" They remounted and continued their journey. As the afternoon wore on, Quinn pointed ahead. "There, see that?" Gemma shaded her eyes and could just make out structures in the distance, buildings, a town. "Is that Deming?" "That is it. We will be there within the hour." As they drew closer, Deming resolved into a respectable frontier town. The main street was wide and dusty, lined with wooden buildings of various sizes. She could see the general store, a saloon, a church with a white steeple, a hotel, and various other businesses. People moved along the wooden sidewalks, going about their daily business. It looked like civilization, like safety, like a fresh start. Quinn guided his horse down the main street, and people looked up curiously at them. Gemma was suddenly aware of how she must look, sunburned and disheveled, being carried on the back of a cowboy's horse. She could practically hear the gossip starting. "The general store is just up here," Quinn said, apparently unconcerned about the attention they were drawing. He stopped in front of a neat building with Easton's General Store painted on the sign. Before they could dismount, a portly man with thinning hair and spectacles came hurrying out. "Good Lord, is that Gemma?" he exclaimed. "My dear girl, what happened to you?" "Hello, Cousin Harold," Gemma said wearily as Quinn helped her down. Her legs wobbled and Quinn kept a steadying hand on her elbow. "I had a bit of trouble on the way here." Harold listened with increasing alarm as Quinn briefly explained finding Gemma in the desert. "Merciful heavens, you could have died, and your wagon is completely lost." "I can probably retrieve it and whatever supplies survived," Quinn offered. "If you can tell me approximately where it broke down, Miss Easton, I can ride out tomorrow and bring back what I can." "You have already done so much," Gemma protested. "It is no trouble. Besides, your cousin probably paid good money for those supplies. No sense leaving them out there for the vultures and coyotes." Harold was effusive in his gratitude, pumping Quinn's hand vigorously. "You saved my cousin's life, young man. I cannot thank you enough. Please, you must let me pay you something, or at least provide you with supplies for your trouble." Quinn looked uncomfortable again. "That is not necessary, sir. I am just glad I was there to help." But Harold would not hear of it, insisting that Quinn at least take some food supplies for his ride back to the ranch. While Harold fussed over the arrangements, Gemma found herself alone with Quinn for a moment. "Thank you," she said quietly, looking up at him. "I know I said it before, but I do not think I can say it enough. You saved my life." Quinn met her eyes, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "I am glad I found you, Gemma. Real glad." He hesitated, then added, "If you ever need anything, the Running J is about 10 miles south of town. Anyone can point you in the right direction." "I will remember that," she said softly. Then Harold was back, ushering Gemma inside and calling for his housekeeper to draw a bath and prepare a room. Gemma glanced back once and saw Quinn standing beside his horse, watching her. He touched the brim of his hat in farewell, and then he was mounting up and riding away. She told herself it was ridiculous to feel such a sense of loss watching him go. She had only known him for less than a day. But somehow, in that short time, Quinn Everett had become important to her in a way she did not fully understand. The next few days passed in a blur of recovery. Harold's housekeeper, a kindly older woman named Mrs. Chen, clucked over Gemma's sunburns and blisters, applying soothing ointments and insisting she rest. Harold was solicitous and welcoming, showing her the guest room that would be hers and explaining how the store operated. The general store was a typical frontier establishment, selling everything from food staples to fabric to tools to candy. Harold explained that Gemma's duties would include helping customers, maintaining inventory, keeping the books, and managing the counter when he was busy with other tasks. It seemed straightforward enough, and Gemma was grateful for the opportunity. On the third day after her arrival, Quinn returned with the wagon. He had somehow managed to repair the broken wheel well enough to get it back to town, and he had retrieved most of her supplies. Harold paid him generously, despite Quinn's protests, and insisted he stay for supper. Gemma had been helping in the store when Quinn arrived, and her heart had done a foolish little leap when she saw him tying his horse outside. She tried to tell herself she was just grateful for the return of her belongings, but she knew it was more than that. Over supper, Quinn and Harold discussed the state of the range, cattle prices, and local news while Gemma listened quietly. She found herself watching Quinn, noticing small things. The way he listened intently when others spoke, the crinkles around his eyes when he smiled, the calluses on his hands that spoke of hard work, the gentle way he spoke to Mrs. Chen when she offered him more food. After the meal, Quinn prepared to leave. "It is late," Harold said. "You should stay the night and head back to the ranch in the morning." But Quinn shook his head. "Thank you kindly, but there is a full moon tonight and my horse knows the way. Besides, I told the boss I would be back tonight." Harold walked him out to prepare his horse, leaving Gemma and Quinn alone for a moment on the porch. "How are you feeling?" Quinn asked. "Much better. Almost back to normal, thanks to Mrs. Chen's care." Gemma hesitated, then added, "And thank you for retrieving the wagon." "You did not have to do that." "I wanted to," Quinn said simply. He looked at her in the lamplight spilling from the windows, and she thought she saw something warm in his eyes. "I am glad you are settling in well." "Quinn," she said impulsively, "I meant what I said before. If you are ever in town and need anything, please do not hesitate to call on me. I owe you a debt I can never fully repay." He smiled. "You do not owe me anything, Gemma, but I appreciate the offer, and I am in town fairly regular for supplies and such. I will stop by and say hello, if that is all right with you." "I would like that," she said, and realized she meant it more than was probably proper for someone she had just met. Harold returned with the horse, and Quinn mounted up. He tipped his hat to both of them and rode off into the night, quickly swallowed by the darkness beyond the town's lights. "That is a good man," Harold commented as they went back inside. "Honest, hardworking, reliable, the kind of man you can count on." "Yes," Gemma agreed softly. "He is." Over the following weeks, Gemma settled into her new life in Deming. She learned the rhythm of the store, memorizing inventory and prices, becoming familiar with the regular customers. She discovered she enjoyed the work. People were friendly, eager to welcome Harold's cousin to town, and she slowly began to feel like she belonged here. And true to his word, Quinn stopped by regularly. At first, it was maybe once a week when he came to town for supplies. He would always make a point of greeting her, asking how she was settling in, exchanging a few friendly words. Then his visits became more frequent, twice a week, then 3 times. It did not take long for Gemma to realize that Quinn was coming to town more often than was strictly necessary for ranch business. And it took even less time for her to admit to herself that she looked forward to his visits with an eagerness that had nothing to do with gratitude, and everything to do with the way her heart lifted when she saw him. Their conversations grew longer and more personal. Quinn would time his visits for the slower afternoon hours when Gemma could take a break. They would sit on the bench outside the store, or sometimes walk down to the little park near the church, and they would talk about everything and nothing. Their pasts, their hopes, their observations about life and people, and the strange, harsh beauty of the desert. Gemma learned that Quinn had lost his parents to fever when he was 17 and had been on his own ever since. That he loved horses with a passion bordering on obsession. That he had a quiet sense of humor and a thoughtful way of looking at the world. That he was deeply loyal to the few people he let close. Quinn learned that Gemma had been close to her father and still grieved his loss. That she loved reading but had few opportunities for it now. That she was stronger than she looked and more ambitious than she let on. That she had a quick mind and a kind heart. They were falling in love, though neither said it aloud. It was there in the way Quinn's eyes softened when he looked at her. In the way Gemma found excuses to touch his hand or arm during their conversations. In the way they both seemed reluctant to part when it was time for Quinn to return to the ranch. The town noticed, of course. Frontier towns had little entertainment besides gossip, and the developing romance between Harold's cousin and the cowboy from the running Jay provided plenty of fodder. Mrs. Chen teased Gemma gently about her gentleman caller, and Harold watched their interactions with an approving eye. 2 months after Gemma's arrival in Deming, the town held a harvest dance. It was a social event that brought in people from the surrounding ranches and farms, a rare opportunity for the scattered community to gather together for celebration. Gemma had been looking forward to it for weeks, though she tried not to think too hard about why. Harold had given her money to buy fabric, and she had sewn herself a new dress, a simple but flattering design in deep blue that brought out her eyes. Mrs. Chen helped her arrange her dark hair in a more elaborate style than her usual practical bun. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Chen said approvingly. "That young man of yours will not be able to take his eyes off you." "He is not my young man," Gemma protested, but she could not quite hide her smile. The dance was held in the large barn on the edge of town, decorated with lanterns and bunting. By the time Harold and Gemma arrived, it was already crowded with people in their best clothes, ready to dance and socialize and enjoy themselves. Gemma scanned the crowd, trying not to be too obvious about looking for Quinn. She had not seen him in 3 days, and she wondered if he would even come. Ranch work did not always allow for social events, and she had no real claim on his time or attention. Then she saw him standing near the refreshment table, talking with another cowboy she did not recognize. He was dressed more formally than she had ever seen him, in clean dark trousers and a pressed white shirt. His hair was neatly combed, and he was freshly shaved. He looked handsome and slightly uncomfortable, tugging at his collar as he spoke. Then he turned and saw her, and the discomfort vanished, replaced by an expression that made her heart race. He said something to his companion and started making his way through the crowd toward her. "Miss Easton," he said when he reached her, and there was something warm and intimate in the way he said her name. "You look beautiful tonight." "Thank you," she said, feeling her cheeks heat. "You look very nice yourself." "Would you do me the honor of a dance?" he asked, extending his hand. She placed her hand in his, feeling the calluses against her palm, and let him lead her to the area where couples were already dancing to the lively tune being played by a small band of local musicians. Quinn was not an elegant dancer, but he was competent enough, and what he lacked in skill he made up for in enthusiasm. Gemma found herself laughing as he spun her around, both of them narrowly avoiding collisions with other couples. "I am not very good at this," Quinn admitted with a sheepish grin. Neither am I, Gemma said, but I am having fun. They danced several more dances until both were breathless and laughing. When a slower song began, Quinn pulled her closer and they swayed together in a more intimate embrace. Gemma rested one hand on his shoulder and felt his hand warm and steady at her waist. I have been thinking, Quinn said quietly, his voice close to her ear, about a lot of things. What kind of things? Gemma asked, her heart beating faster. About how sometimes life puts you in exactly the right place at the right time. How finding you in the desert was maybe not just luck or coincidence. She pulled back slightly to look at his face. His expression was serious, almost vulnerable. What are you saying, Quinn? I am saying that meeting you changed something for me. I have been coming to town so often because I can't seem to stay away, because seeing you has become the best part of my week. He paused, searching her eyes. I am saying that I have feelings for you, Gemma. Strong feelings. And I need to know if you might feel the same way. Joy burst through her chest like sunrise. Yes, she said softly. Yes, I feel the same way. I have for weeks now. The smile that broke across Quinn's face was like light breaking through clouds. Really, really, she confirmed. I think I started falling for you the moment you promised to get me to safety. And I have been falling ever since. Right there in the middle of the dance floor, surrounded by half the town, Quinn cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise, and Gemma felt it all the way down to her toes. When they finally broke apart, they were both grinning like fools, and Gemma became aware that they had attracted quite a bit of attention. People were smiling at them, some even applauding. She buried her face in Quinn's shoulder, half embarrassed and half delighted. I suppose the whole town knows now, Quinn said, sounding amused rather than concerned. I suppose they do, Gemma agreed. Good, Quinn said firmly. Let them know. I am courting Gemma Easton, and I do not care who knows it. The rest of the evening passed in a happy blur. They danced more, talked with friends and neighbors, and stole kisses when they thought no one was looking. Harold beamed at them benevolently, clearly pleased by the match. Mrs. Chen kept bringing them food and drinks, fussing over them like a mother hen. As the dance was winding down, Quinn walked Gemma and Harold back to their home above the store. At the door, Quinn held Gemma's hand and looked at Harold seriously. Sir, I want you to know that my intentions toward your cousin are completely honorable. I care for her deeply, and I want to court her properly, with your permission and blessing. Harold, looking pleased, shook Quinn's hand firmly. Young man, you saved her life and you have proven yourself to be honest and hardworking. You have my blessing, and I think you will make Gemma very happy. I will certainly try my best, sir, Quinn promised. After Harold went inside, Gemma and Quinn lingered on the porch for a few more precious moments. When will I see you again? Gemma asked. Tomorrow, Quinn said immediately. And the day after. And every day I can possibly manage. I am not wasting any more time, Gemma. I want to spend as much time with you as possible. I want that too, she said. He kissed her again, slowly and thoroughly, and when he finally pulled away, they were both slightly dazed. I should go, Quinn said reluctantly. Before I forget myself completely and your cousin comes out with a shotgun, Gemma laughed. Harold is not the shotgun type. Still, I should behave like a gentleman. He touched her cheek gently. Good night, Gemma. Good night, Quinn. She watched him walk to his horse and mount up, and he looked back once, raising his hand in farewell before riding off into the night. Gemma stood on the porch for a long time after he disappeared, her hand pressed to her lips, her heart so full she thought it might burst. The courtship that followed was sweet and earnest. Quinn began coming to town almost every day, even if only for a short visit. He would help Gemma with heavy tasks around the store, carrying stock and moving furniture. They would take walks in the evening, strolling down the quiet streets while the desert cooled and the stars came out. Quinn told her about his work, the challenges and satisfactions of ranch life. Gemma told him about the customers at the store, the small dramas and comedies of daily life in a frontier town. They talked about books they had read, places they wanted to see, dreams they had for the future. On Sundays, they would often go on longer outings. Quinn borrowed a buggy from the ranch and took Gemma on drives through the surrounding countryside, showing her the places he loved. They picnicked by dry creek beds that only flowed after rare rains. They watched the sunset paint the mesas in shades of gold and crimson. They talked for hours, learning each other's thoughts and hearts. 3 months into their courtship, Quinn took Gemma to see the Running J Ranch. She had been curious about where he lived and worked, and he was eager to show her. The ranch was impressive, a sprawling operation with extensive grazing land and a large main house, bunkhouse, barn, and various outbuildings. The owner, a weathered but friendly man named James Jackson, welcomed Gemma warmly. "So you are the young lady who has our Quinn making the ride to town every chance he gets," Jackson said with a knowing smile. "It is nice to finally meet you." Quinn showed her around, introducing her to the other ranch hands, showing her the horses he worked with, pointing out the different operations. She could see the pride he took in his work, the respect his co-workers had for him. She met his horse, the bay gelding who had carried them both to safety, and fed him an apple while Quinn told her stories about the animal's intelligence and loyalty. "What do you think?" Quinn asked as they stood on a rise overlooking the ranch buildings, the land stretching out endlessly around them. "It is beautiful," Gemma said honestly. "I can see why you love it here." Quinn took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I do love it. But lately I have been thinking about the future more, about what I want from life." "And what do you want?" Gemma asked softly. "I want my own place," Quinn said, his voice intense. "Nothing huge, just enough land for a small herd, a good house, room to grow. I have been saving for years, and Mr. Jackson has been advising me. He thinks in another year or two, I might have enough for a down payment on something modest." "That sounds wonderful, Quinn." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I want you to be part of that future, Gemma. I know it is probably too soon to say this, and I do not want to pressure you, but I need you to know what I am thinking, what I am hoping for." Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Tell me, I am falling in love with you." "No, that is not right. I have already fallen. I am in love with you, Gemma Easton. And when I think about my future, about that house and that land, you are there. You are in every vision I have of what I want my life to be." Tears pricked at Gemma's eyes, but they were happy tears. "Oh, Quinn. I love you too, so much. I did not think it was possible to feel this way about someone." He pulled her close and kissed her, deep and passionate and full of promise. When they broke apart, they were both smiling. "I want to marry you," Quinn said. "Not right away if you are not ready, but someday." "Will you think about it?" "I do not need to think about it," Gemma said. "Yes, yes, I will marry you, Quinn Everett." His whoop of joy probably carried all the way back to the ranch house. He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing with pure happiness. When he finally set her down, he was grinning so wide it looked like his face might split. "You have made me the happiest man alive," he said. "And you have made me the happiest woman," Gemma replied. They decided to wait a few months before actually getting married, wanting to save more money and make proper preparations. Quinn was determined to have something to offer Gemma besides just his cowboy wages, and with Mr. Jackson's help, he began seriously looking into available properties. Meanwhile, Gemma continued working at the store, but now everything had a golden glow to it. She was in love and engaged to be married. Sometimes she would touch the simple silver ring Quinn had given her and marvel at how drastically her life had changed in such a short time. She wrote letters to old friends back in Missouri, telling them about Quinn and the wedding plans. Their responses were uniformly happy for her, though some expressed concern about the hardships of frontier life. Gemma understood their worries, but she could not imagine being anywhere else. This harsh, beautiful land had nearly killed her, but it had also given her Quinn. As winter approached and the desert cooled, Quinn and Mr. Jackson found a property that seemed perfect. It was a small ranch about 15 miles from Deming, with a modest but solid house, a barn, and about 200 acres of grazing land. The previous owner had fallen on hard times and was selling at a reasonable price. With Quinn's savings and a loan arranged through a bank in town, they could make it work. Quinn could barely contain his excitement when he told Gemma about it. "It is not much yet," he said. "The house needs some fixing up and the barn needs repairs. But it has good water, decent grass, and room to grow. We could build something real there, Gemma." "Let me see it," she said. The next Sunday they rode out to look at the property together. The house was small, just 3 rooms, but it was structurally sound. The previous owner's wife had planted a small garden that had gone to seed, but Gemma could imagine bringing it back to life. The barn was weathered but functional, and the land itself was beautiful in its stark way, with views of distant mountains and endless sky. "It is perfect," Gemma said and meant it. "You really think so?" Quinn asked anxiously. "I know it is not fancy." "I do not need fancy," Gemma said firmly. "I need a home, and this with you will be perfect." They set a wedding date for early spring, after the coldest weather had passed, but before the brutal summer heat arrived. The whole town seemed to be excited about the wedding. Mrs. Chen insisted on helping with the dress. Harold offered to host the reception at his store, and various townspeople volunteered to help with food and decorations. During the winter months, Quinn spent his free time fixing up the house with help from other ranch hands. He repaired the roof, replaced broken windows, and patched holes in the walls. He built new furniture, including a bed frame that he crafted with obvious care. Gemma helped when she could, painting walls and cleaning and making curtains from fabric Harold sold to her at cost. The little house slowly transformed from a run-down building into a real home. Every improvement felt like a promise of the life they would build together. As the wedding day approached, Gemma felt an excitement she had never experienced before. She had never imagined this for herself back in Missouri. She had thought her future held nothing but work and loneliness, struggling to survive in a world that did not have many options for women. Now she was about to marry a good man who loved her, starting a life that was full of possibility. The night before the wedding, as Gemma was finishing the final details on her dress, Mrs. Chen sat with her. "You are very lucky, you know," the older woman said. "Not just because Quinn is a good man, though he is, but because you found each other honestly. Too many marriages out here are arrangements of convenience, but you two have something real." "I know," Gemma said softly. "Sometimes I still cannot quite believe it. If my wagon wheel had not broken, if Quinn had not been checking on those stray cattle, if he had been even an hour later finding me, none of this would have happened." "But it did happen," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "And now you get to build a life together. That is a precious gift." The wedding took place on a beautiful spring morning in late March of 1883. The small church was packed with people, townspeople and ranch hands, and even some of the folks from surrounding homesteads. Gemma wore her new dress, simple white cotton with delicate embroidery that she and Mrs. Chen had worked on together. She carried a bouquet of early wildflowers that Quinn had picked for her that morning. Harold walked her down the aisle with obvious pride and affection. At the altar, Quinn waited in his best clothes, his hair slicked back and his eyes shining with emotion. When Gemma reached him and he took her hands, she saw that his hands were trembling slightly. "You are beautiful," he whispered. "You are handsome," she whispered back. The ceremony was simple and traditional. They exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other through all the challenges life might bring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and Quinn kissed her, Gemma felt a sense of rightness that went bone deep. This was where she was meant to be. This was who she was meant to be with. The reception at Harold's store was lively and joyful. There was food and drink and dancing. People gave speeches and told stories, teasing the newlyweds with good-natured humor. Mr. Jackson gave them a young heifer as a wedding present, the start of their future herd. Harold gave them supplies for their new home. Other friends gave quilts and tools and various practical gifts. As the sun began to set, Quinn and Gemma said their goodbyes and rode out to their new home. Quinn had prepared everything ahead of time, starting a fire in the fireplace and stocking the pantry. Lanterns glowed in the windows, making the little house look warm and welcoming in the gathering dusk. Quinn helped Gemma down from the buggy, and then, to her surprise and delight, he swept her up in his arms. "Carrying you across the threshold," he explained with a grin. "It is tradition." He carried her inside and set her down gently in the middle of their front room. For a moment they just stood there, taking in the reality of it. This was their home. They were married. Their life together was beginning. "Mrs. Everett," Quinn said softly, testing out her new name. "Mr. Everett," Gemma replied, smiling. He cupped her face in his hands, his expression tender. "I promise you, Gemma, I am going to spend every day of my life trying to make you happy." "And I promise the same to you," she said. They kissed, and it was different from all the kisses that had come before. This was not the sweet, restrained kisses of courtship. This was passion and promise and the beginning of their intimate life together. When they finally moved to the bedroom, to the bed Quinn had built with his own hands, it felt natural and right and perfect. Later, lying in the darkness with Quinn's arm around her and her head on his chest, Gemma thought about the journey that had brought her here. The pain of losing her father and leaving everything she had known. The terror of being lost in the desert, certain she was going to die. And then Quinn, appearing like an answer to a prayer she had not quite known how to voice. "What are you thinking about?" Quinn asked, his voice rumbling in his chest beneath her ear. "About how strange life is. How my wagon breaking seemed like the worst possible thing, but it led me to the best possible thing." Quinn's arm tightened around her. "I think about that too, about how close I came to not finding you. If I had checked the north pasture instead of the east one, if I had decided to camp somewhere else, if I had been even a little bit less observant and missed seeing you lying there in the twilight." "But you did find me," Gemma said firmly. "You did, and you saved me, and now we are here together. That is what matters." "You are right," Quinn agreed. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I love you, Gemma." "I love you too," she whispered. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other and in the warm certainty that they had found where they belonged. The first year of marriage was one of hard work and joy. Quinn continued working at the Running Jay, learning as much as he could while saving money to buy their first cattle. Gemma set up a small vegetable garden and began keeping chickens. She also took in some sewing work from town, adding to their income. Every penny was carefully saved toward building up their ranch. It was not easy. The desert was an unforgiving place, and they faced challenges regularly. A late frost killed half of Gemma's first garden. 3 of their initial 5 chickens were taken by a coyote before Quinn could build a better enclosure. The well nearly ran dry during a particularly harsh summer. There were days when the work seemed endless and the progress painfully slow, but there were far more good days than bad. Days when Quinn came home from the ranch, and they would sit on their porch watching the sunset, talking about their day. Days when they rode into town together and were greeted warmly by friends and neighbors. Days when they lay in bed on Sunday mornings, wrapped in each other, with no place they needed to be. By their first anniversary, they had saved enough to buy a small starter herd of 10 cattle and a young bull. It was modest, but it was theirs. Quinn was able to reduce his hours at the Running Jay, spending more time building up their own operation. Mr. Jackson was supportive, understanding that Quinn was working toward his dream. And then, in the fall of their second year of marriage, Gemma realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had not wanted to say anything until she was certain. When she finally told Quinn over dinner one evening, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. His face went through a series of expressions in rapid succession: surprise, shock, joy, and then a kind of overwhelming emotion that brought tears to his eyes. He jumped up from the table and pulled Gemma into his arms, holding her tightly. "A baby," he said, his voice choked. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Gemma said, laughing and crying at the same time. "In the spring, I think. Maybe April or May." Quinn pulled back to look at her face, then carefully placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "There is a baby in there, our baby." "Our baby," Gemma confirmed. He kissed her then, tender and reverent, as if she was suddenly made of something precious and fragile. That night, he held her close and talked about all the things he wanted to teach their child. How to ride a horse, how to read the land, how to be honest and kind and strong. "What if it is a girl?" Gemma asked, amused. "Then I will teach her all those things anyway," Quinn said firmly. "A daughter of mine is going to know how to take care of herself and not depend on anyone else if she does not want to." "Like her mother," Gemma said softly, thinking of that girl who had set out from Missouri alone, determined to make her own way. "Exactly like her mother," Quinn agreed. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Gemma continued her work through the winter, though Quinn insisted she not lift anything heavy and fussed over her constantly. She found his concern endearing even when it became slightly overbearing. In April of 1885, Gemma went into labor. Mrs. Chen came out to the ranch to help along with the local midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Rodriguez. Quinn paced outside for hours while Gemma labored, occasionally coming in to hold her hand and offer encouragement before being shooed away again. Finally, as dawn was breaking, a baby's cry rang out through the small house. Mrs. Chen came to the door with a tired but radiant smile. "You have a son," she told Quinn, "a healthy baby boy, and Gemma did wonderfully." Quinn rushed inside to find his wife propped up in bed, exhausted but smiling, holding a small bundle wrapped in a blanket. He approached almost reverently and looked down at his son for the first time. The baby was red-faced and wrinkled, with a surprising amount of dark hair. As Quinn watched, the tiny infant yawned and waved one impossibly small fist. "He is perfect," Quinn breathed. "Gemma, he is perfect." "Do you want to hold him?" Gemma asked. Quinn carefully took the baby, cradling him with exaggerated care as if he might break. The infant squirmed and then settled, apparently content in his father's arms. Quinn's face was a study in wonder and love. "Hello, son," he said softly. "I am your papa, and I promise you I am going to do everything I can to give you a good life." They named him Henry after Gemma's father. Henry Quinn Everett. He was a healthy, lusty baby who ate well and slept reasonably well and quickly became the center of his parents' world. Quinn was a devoted father from the start. He would get up for the nighttime feedings, bringing Henry to Gemma, and then staying awake with them, talking softly or singing tunelessly until the baby fell back asleep. He built a cradle that rocked smoothly and later a higher chair for when Henry started eating solid food. He was patient with the crying and delighted by every small milestone. Gemma watched her husband with their son and fell even more deeply in love with him. She had known Quinn was a good man, but seeing him as a father revealed new dimensions of his character. His gentleness, his patience, his fierce protectiveness. As Henry grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. The herd increased. They were able to make improvements to the house, adding a room for Henry and later putting in better windows. Quinn hired a hand to help with the growing operation, a young man named Tom who proved reliable and hardworking. Life settled into a rhythm. Work and family, challenges and joys, the slow accumulation of success. Gemma still helped with the ranch work when she could, though with Henry to care for, her time was limited. She found she did not mind. Watching her son grow, teaching him words and songs, showing him the world around their home, it was fulfilling in a way she had not anticipated. When Henry was 3, Gemma became pregnant again. This time she recognized the signs earlier and told Quinn over breakfast one morning in their usual matter-of-fact way. "I think I am expecting again," she said. Quinn looked up from his eggs, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Really?" "Really?" He got up and came around the table to hug her. "That is wonderful news." He glanced over at Henry, who was busy making a mess with his own breakfast. "How do you think he will take having a brother or sister?" "I think he will adjust," Gemma said. "He is a good-natured child." This second pregnancy was a bit more difficult than the first. Gemma was more tired, more prone to nausea. But with Quinn's support and Mrs. Chen's help, she managed. In late fall, she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose Marie. Rose was different from Henry from the start. Where Henry had been placid and easy, Rose was fussy and demanding. But she was also beautiful, with Gemma's dark hair and Quinn's warm eyes. Quinn was instantly besotted with his daughter, carrying her around and talking to her constantly. "You are going to be strong and smart," Quinn told baby Rose. "Just like your mama, and no boy is going to push you around." Gemma would laugh at his declarations, but she was touched by his determination that their daughter would grow up knowing she was capable of anything. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own mix of trials and triumphs. The ranch grew into a solidly successful operation. They hired another hand, and then another. They built a larger barn and improved the fencing. The house was expanded further, becoming a comfortable, welcoming home. Henry and Rose grew up healthy and strong, running wild around the ranch under their parents' watchful eyes. Henry took after his father, fascinated by horses and cattle and everything to do with ranch work. Rose was more interested in everything animals, yes, but also books and plants and people. She was curious and bold, always asking questions and never satisfied with simple answers. When Henry was 10 and Rose was 7, Quinn took a day off from work to take the whole family on a picnic, just like he used to do with Gemma during their courtship. They drove out to a spot Quinn favored, a place with a good view of the surrounding desert. As they sat together eating sandwiches and watching the children play, Quinn turned to Gemma with a thoughtful expression. "You remember the day we met?" he asked. "Of course I do." "How could I ever forget?" "I have been thinking about it lately," Quinn said. "About how terrified you must have been, lost out there alone. About how close I came to never finding you. About how different my life would be if I had not." Gemma took his hand, lacing their fingers together the way she had 1,000 times before. "But you did find me. You saved me. And not just my life, Quinn, You saved me in every way a person can be saved." "You saved me too," Quinn said seriously. "I was just going through the motions before I met you, working and saving without really knowing why. You gave me purpose, a reason for all of it." They watched their children, Henry helping Rose climb a rock formation while both shrieked with laughter. "Look at what we built," Gemma said softly. "A life, a family, a home, all because you kept a promise." "What promise?" Quinn asked. "The first thing you said to me when you found me in the desert. You said I was going to be fine. You promised, and you kept that promise." Quinn smiled and pulled her close, kissing her temple. "And I will keep on keeping it, every day for the rest of our lives." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in those familiar shades of orange and gold, the Everett family packed up their picnic and headed home. The children chattered in the back of the wagon, tired but happy. Quinn drove with one hand, the other arm around Gemma. She leaned against his solid warmth, feeling utterly content. They had made a good life here in this harsh, beautiful land. It had not always been easy. There had been droughts and hard winters, sick cattle and money troubles, all the challenges that came with frontier living. But they had faced everything together, and their love had only grown stronger. Years continued to unfold in their steady rhythm. Henry grew into a capable young man, eventually taking on more and more responsibility for the ranch. He was his father's son through and through, with the same steady temperament and innate understanding of animals. When he turned 21, Quinn made him a full partner in the operation. Rose turned out to be as bright and determined as her parents had hoped. She insisted on learning to read and write beyond the basic schooling available in Deming. So Gemma taught her everything she knew and then ordered books from back east so they could learn together. By the time she was 15, Rose was not only helping run the household but also keeping the ranch's books, her neat handwriting and quick mind for numbers making her invaluable to the operation. As Quinn and Gemma entered their 40s, they watched with pride and amazement as their children became independent adults. Henry married a sweet-natured girl from a neighboring ranch, and they built a house on the far corner of the property. Rose, true to her independent spirit, announced at 18 that she wanted to go to a teaching college in California. Quinn nearly balked at the idea of his daughter traveling so far, but Gemma reminded him of his own promises about raising a strong daughter who could do anything she set her mind to. So they sent Rose off with their blessing and their savings, trusting she would make them proud. One evening, after Henry had gone home to his wife, and with Rose away at school, Quinn and Gemma sat together on their porch as they had done countless times over the years. The sunset was particularly beautiful that night, streaking the sky with vivid colors. "You ever miss it?" Quinn asked suddenly. "Your old life, Missouri, the city life you might have had if things had been different." Gemma considered the question seriously, as she always did when Quinn asked her something important. "No," she said finally. "I do not miss it at all. This is my home. You are my home. I would not trade a single moment of our life together for anything that old life might have offered." "Not even the day your wagon broke down and you nearly died?" Quinn asked with a slight smile. Gemma laughed. "Well, maybe I would skip that specific experience if I could. The terror and the dehydration were not particularly enjoyable. But the result, finding you, building this life, no, I would not change that." Quinn pulled her closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Gemma Everett, more today than yesterday and less than tomorrow." "That is very poetic for a cowboy," Gemma teased gently. "I have my moments," Quinn said, "especially when I am sitting with my beautiful wife watching the sunset." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence that only comes after years of knowing someone completely. Finally, Gemma spoke again. "Quinn, do you remember what you told me once? About how sometimes life puts you in exactly the right place at the right time?" "I remember. I think about that often. About how all the terrible things that happened, my father dying, losing everything, my wagon breaking, being lost and afraid and alone, all of that led me to you. Led me to this life. And I cannot help but think that somehow it was all worth it. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Quinn said. "Because I think the same thing. If my parents had not died when I was 17, I might never have gone to Texas. If I had not gone to Texas, I would not have ended up in New Mexico. If I had not been working at the Running J, I would not have been checking on those stray cattle that day. Every painful thing, every difficult moment, every decision I made led me to that exact spot at that exact time when you needed me most. And I needed you," Gemma said softly, "in every way." "We needed each other," Quinn corrected. "We still do." As full darkness fell and the stars began to emerge in the vast sky above them, they remained on the porch, holding hands and watching the night settle over their land. This was their kingdom, built from nothing through hard work and determination and love. It was not grand or glamorous, but it was theirs, and it was good. More years passed. Henry and his wife had children, making Quinn and Gemma grandparents. Rose came home from college with a teaching certificate, and to everyone's surprise, a fiancé, a young professor she had met in California, who was willing to move to New Mexico for her. They settled in Deming, where Rose opened a school that quickly became known as the best in the region. Quinn and Gemma gradually turned more of the ranch operations over to Henry, though Quinn could never quite fully retire. He still needed to ride the range regularly, checking on cattle and mending fences. It was in his blood, Gemma knew. This life, this land, it was part of who he was. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. Friends came from all over, some traveling quite a distance. Mr. Jackson, now quite elderly, made the trip from where he had retired. Mrs. Chen came, still spry and sharp-tongued. Harold came with his wife, having finally married late in life. The house and yard were filled with people celebrating Quinn and Gemma's marriage and the life they had built together. As the party wound down and the guests began to leave, Quinn and Gemma found themselves alone again on their porch. It had become their spot, the place where they had shared so many important moments over the years. 25 years, Quinn marveled. A quarter of a century. How did that happen? "One day at a time," Gemma said, smiling. "One sunrise, one sunset, one moment at a time." "Best 25 years of my life," Quinn declared. "Mine too," Gemma agreed. They sat in companionable silence for a while, and then Quinn said, "I want to show you something." He went inside and returned a few minutes later carrying something wrapped in cloth. He sat down beside Gemma and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a book, leather-bound and clearly handmade. "What is this?" Gemma asked. "Our story," Quinn said. "I have been writing it down bit by bit over the last few years. I wanted to make sure it was remembered. That our children and grandchildren and all the generations that come after know how we met, how we fell in love, how we built this life together." Gemma took the book with trembling hands and opened it. Quinn's careful handwriting filled the pages, telling their story from the beginning. From the day her wagon broke down to the moment he found her in the desert. Their courtship, their wedding, the birth of their children, all the challenges and triumphs of their years together. Tears welled up in her eyes as she read. "Quinn, this is beautiful. This is the most thoughtful gift you could have given me. I wanted to make sure your courage was remembered," Quinn said. "You were so brave, Gemma, setting out alone for a new life. And even when everything went wrong, even when you thought you were going to die, you kept fighting. That deserves to be remembered and honored. I was only brave because you gave me something to be brave for, Gemma said, closing the book and holding it to her chest. You gave me hope and love and a future. You gave me everything. Quinn pulled her close and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of all the love that had sustained them through 25 years of marriage. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling. You think we will get another 25 years? Gemma asked. I am certainly going to try, Quinn said. I plan on growing old and gray with you, Mrs. Everett, sitting on this porch and watching sunsets until we are both too creaky to get out of our chairs. That sounds perfect, Gemma said, and it was perfect. Their life was not grand or glamorous or particularly remarkable to anyone but them, but it was filled with love and purpose and the quiet satisfaction that comes from building something lasting. They had created a family, a home, a legacy. They had taken the harsh land and made it bloom. They had faced every challenge together and come through stronger. As they sat together on the porch that night, celebrating 25 years of marriage and looking forward to however many more they would be blessed with, Gemma thought back to that terrified young woman lost in the desert. She would never have believed that her moment of greatest desperation would lead to such happiness. That the cowboy who appeared out of the twilight with a promise of safety would become her whole world. But that was exactly what had happened. Quinn had saved her life that day, but more than that, he had given her a reason to live it. He had shown her what love could be, what partnership meant, what it felt like to be truly known and accepted and cherished, and she had given him the same things. They had saved each other, really. Two lost souls finding their way home to each other in the vast expanse of the frontier. The years continued to roll by, each one adding more chapters to their story. They welcomed more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. The ranch continued to thrive under Henry's management. Rose's school became an institution in Deming, educating generations of children. The family grew and expanded, all of them thriving on the foundation that Quinn and Gemma had built. When Quinn turned 60, he finally agreed to fully retire from active ranch work, though he still spent most of his days outside, always finding something that needed his attention. Gemma teased him that he would probably die with his boots on, unable to fully stop working. He just grinned and agreed that was probably true. They had good health and good fortune for many years. They traveled a bit, visiting Rose in Deming regularly and taking a trip back to Missouri, once to show Quinn where Gemma had grown up. But they were always happiest at home on their ranch, surrounded by family and the land they loved. On a warm spring evening when they were both in their early 70s, they sat on their porch as always, watching the sun set over their land. The ranch was busier than ever now, with Henry running a large operation that employed several hands and supported multiple families. But the core of it, the heart of it, was still the little house where Quinn and Gemma had started their married life nearly 50 years before. 50 years, Gemma said, echoing Quinn's words from their 25th anniversary. How is that even possible? Stubbornness and determination, Quinn said with a chuckle. And the fact that I refuse to let you go. I am not going anywhere, Gemma assured him, patting his hand. They sat quietly for a while and then Quinn said, I have been thinking about that book I made for our 25th anniversary, the one telling our story. I still have it. I read it sometimes when I want to remember. I want to add to it, Quinn said. I want to write about these last 25 years too. Make sure the whole story is there. Then we will work on it together, Gemma said. It is both our story after all. So they began spending their evenings writing, taking turns adding to the narrative. Quinn's handwriting was shakier now, but his memory was still sharp. Gemma's eyesight was not what it used to be, but with good light, she could still write clearly. Together, they chronicled the second half of their marriage, all the joys and sorrows, the grandchildren and the expansion of the ranch, the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. By the time they finished, the book was thick with pages, a complete record of their journey together. Henry had it properly bound in fine leather with their names embossed on the cover. The story of Quinn and Gemma Everett. One of their great-granddaughters, a bright child of about 8, asked Gemma to read it to her one afternoon. So Gemma sat in the rocking chair Quinn had made decades ago and read their story aloud. The little girl listened with wide eyes, gasping at the dramatic parts and sighing happily at the romantic ones. When Gemma finished, the child said, "That is the best story I ever heard, and it is all true." "Every word," Gemma confirmed. "Grandma Gemma, were you really that scared when you were lost in the desert?" "I was terrified," Gemma admitted. "More afraid than I have ever been in my life. But then Grandpa Quinn saved you." "He did. He promised I would be all right, and he kept that promise." The little girl thought about this seriously. "I want a love story like that when I grow up." Gemma smiled and stroked the child's hair. "I hope you have one, sweetheart. I hope you find someone who keeps their promises and makes you happy." As the child ran off to play, Gemma remained in the rocking chair, the book in her lap. Quinn came out onto the porch and settled in the chair beside her. "Reading our story again?" he asked. Alice wanted to hear it. She said it was the best story she ever heard. Quinn chuckled. "She is a smart child, she is. They all are. We have been blessed, Quinn, so deeply blessed." "We have," Quinn agreed. He reached over and took her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "And it all started with a broken wagon wheel and a stubborn woman who refused to give up." "And a cowboy who kept his promises," Gemma added. They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in those familiar colors they had watched together thousands of times. The land stretched out before them, the ranch they had built from nothing, the legacy they would leave behind. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried their love forward, living proof that two people lost on the frontier had found each other and created something beautiful and lasting. Quinn and Gemma both lived well into their 70s, healthy and active until the end. When they finally did pass, it was peacefully and within a few months of each other, as if neither could bear to exist in a world without the other for very long. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their ranch, under a sky so vast and blue it seemed to go on forever. Their story lived on through their descendants, and through the book they had written together. The story of Quinn and Gemma Everett was passed down through generations, a testament to love and perseverance, and the incredible journey that had begun with a promise in the desert. The ranch remained in the family for over 100 years, growing and changing with the times but always maintaining its heart. And visitors who came there would often hear the story of how it all began. How a young woman had been lost and desperate on the frontier, how a cowboy had appeared with a promise that saved her, and how that promise had bloomed into a love story that spanned a lifetime and created a legacy that endured long after they were gone. It was a simple story, really. Boy finds girl, boy saves girl, girl and boy fall in love. They build a life together. But in the living of it, in the day-to-day reality of choosing each other and their shared dream every single day, it became something extraordinary. It became a testament to what is possible when two people commit to building something together, when they face the harsh realities of life with courage and determination and abiding love. And on warm spring evenings, when the wind blew just right across the New Mexico desert, some said you could still feel their presence on that old porch. Two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had kept their promises to each other through 50 years of marriage, and whose love had transformed a harsh frontier into a home that would shelter and nurture generations to come. The promise Quinn had made to Gemma that desperate day in the desert, "You are going to be fine," had come true in ways neither of them could have imagined. She had been more than fine. She had been loved and cherished. She had been a partner and a builder and a creator of legacy. And so had he. Together, they had turned survival into thriving, turned a chance meeting into a grand love story, and turned an empty patch of desert into a home filled with love and life and laughter. Their story proved that sometimes the darkest moments lead to the brightest futures. That sometimes being lost is the first step to being found, and that a promise made in good faith and kept with dedication can change not just one life but many lives across multiple generations. Quinn and Gemma Everett had lived an extraordinary, ordinary life. They had been cowboys and homesteaders, parents and grandparents, partners and lovers. They had faced drought and hardship, celebrated birth and mourned loss, built dreams and watched them flourish. And through it all, they had had each other. In the end, that was the heart of their story. Not the dramatic rescue, though that was where it started. Not the successful ranch, though that was what they built. The heart of it was simply this: two people who loved each other completely, who chose each other every day, who kept their promises and built a life worth living. And that, more than anything, was why their story endured. Because in a world of uncertainty and hardship, in a time and place where survival was never guaranteed, they had created something certain. They had created love. And love, as it turned out, was the greatest promise of all. The one that saved not just lives but hearts and souls. The one that turned strangers into soulmates, harsh land into home, and one desperate moment into a lifetime of joy. The frontier had tested them, challenged them, nearly destroyed them, but it had also brought them together. And in that bringing together, it had created something lasting and beautiful and true. A love story for the ages, lived out in the small moments and big dreams of two people who had been lost until they found each other.